She fled a toxic love and found herself face to face with the bar's owner, a mafia boss. The bus smelled like diesel and stale cigarettes, a rolling box of metal and regret. Isla Moreno kept her forehead pressed to the cool, vibrating glass, watching the last vestiges of Chicago's skyline dissolve into the flat, gray expanse of the Midwest. She was running on 48 hours of no sleep, fueled only by the acidic burn of terror and the dregs of a $5 coffee. In her lap, a worn-out duffel bag. Inside it, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, $312 in cash, and a fading yellow bruise on her ribs that ached every time she breathed too deeply. She was in her mid-20s, but she felt ancient. The exhaustion went bone deep, a cellular fatigue caused by 2 years of walking on eggshells, of minimizing herself, of learning to predict the weather patterns of a human hurricane named Caleb. Caleb, the manipulator, the controller. The man who whispered, "I love you, and you are worthless," in the same breath, until Isla could no longer tell the difference. He hadn't just stalked her, he had colonized her mind. The emotional wounds were invisible and festering. The physical ones, like the half-moon scar just below her hairline from a thrown phone, were reminders that the psychological war had, in the end, turned physical. The bus finally hissed to a stop in Bell Point. It was not a destination. It was an escape, chosen by throwing a dart at a map in a bus station restroom. Bell Point was an industrial town that had seen better days, maybe decades ago. The buildings were brick, stained with soot. The air was heavy with the smell of damp pavement and something vaguely metallic from the distant steel mills. It was perfect. It was anonymous. She clutched her bag and walked, ignoring the way the few men on the street corner watched her. She found the only motel that looked like it rented by the hour, a place called the Cypress Inn. The paint on the sign was peeling, the O dark. "I need a room," she told the clerk, who was busy watching a small, flickering television. "How long?" he asked, not looking up. Just one night, for now. $28, cash in advance." Isla pulled 3 $10 bills from her pocket. "Can I pay for 3 nights? I need to sleep." The clerk finally looked at her. He took the money. "Name?" Isla's throat tightened. The first rule of running, shed your skin. Isla Shaw." He grunted, slapped a key on the counter. "Room 7, no visitors, no noise." The room was tiny, and the lock was flimsy, but the cot-like bed was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She shoved the room's single wooden chair under the knob, took a scalding hot shower until her skin was red, and fell into a dead, dreamless sleep. She woke up 12 hours later to the sound of trucks rattling past. The panic set in immediately. The $312 was now $222. Sleep was a luxury. Survival was not. She walked the gray streets of Bell Point for hours. Help wanted signs were scarce. A diner needed a dishwasher, but the owner looked at her with a slimy familiarity that made her skin crawl. A laundromat needed an attendant, but the hours were mornings, and she needed to stay invisible during the day. By evening, her hope was as thin as the soles of her sneakers. She turned a corner onto a darker street, one lined with warehouses and empty storefronts, and then she saw it. It wasn't much, just a heavy black door set into a brick wall. The windows were painted over, a small, tasteful neon sign, a stylized silver letter D, was the only indication it was a business. Below it, in small script, the dagger. She hesitated. It looked expensive. It looked quiet. But a small help wanted sign was taped inside the glass. She took a breath, tasting her own fear, and pushed the door open. The inside was dark, the air thick with the smell of lemon oil and old beer. It was long and narrow, with exposed brick and a bar that stretched impossibly far, the mahogany gleaming under low-wattage bulbs. It was empty, save for one person. A woman with sleeves of intricate tattoos running up both arms was wiping down the bar, her black hair pulled into a tight bun. She looked up as Isla entered, her expression sharp and assessing. "We're not open for another hour," the woman said. Her voice was husky. I saw the sign. The help wanted sign. Isla stammered. I'm looking for a job. A waitress. The woman stopped wiping. She walked closer, never breaking eye contact. You waitressed before? Yes, for 4 years. In Chicago, at the aviary. It was a lie, mostly. She'd worked at a diner, but she'd seen the aviary. She knew what it was. The bartender's eyebrows raised slightly. Fancy? She sized Isla up. The worn-out jeans, the thin jacket, the way Isla held herself. Like a bird ready to fly at the first loud noise. You running from something? Chicago? Isla's blood went cold. I just needed a change, a fresh start. The woman? Sienna, as her name tag read, stared at her for a long, uncomfortable minute, then she sighed. I don't care about your story. I care if you can carry a tray and handle drunks. I'm short-staffed tonight. You're wearing black. That's a start. Sienna tossed a small, black apron onto the bar. You start at 9. Tonight, you get tips plus minimum. You bust your ass. You might get to stay. You're slow, or you drop a glass. You're gone. Got it? Relief hit Isla so hard her knees nearly buckled. Yes, thank you. I won't let you down. We'll see, Sienna said, turning back to her glasses. Be back here at 8:45. Isla returned at 8:45. The dagger, at night, was a different animal. The low lights made the dark wood glow. The booths were filled with people. Some were dock workers and laborers, washing away the grime of the day. Others were different. Men in tailored shirts, quiet, watchful, who paid with thick wads of cash. The air hummed with low conversation and the clink of ice. Isla was good at this, better than she'd let on. She was fast, efficient, and had a knack for remembering orders. She kept her head down, her movements fluid. She was a ghost, delivering drinks and clearing plates, and for the first time in months, her mind was quiet. She was just a waitress. She was just Isla Shaw. Around midnight, a group of 3 men in a back booth got loud. They were drunk, sloppy, and had been trying to get her attention for an hour. Isla had been skillfully avoiding them, letting Sienna handle their reorders. But Sienna was busy. The booth's light flickered for service. Isla squared her shoulders and walked over. Another round, she asked, her voice polite, neutral, the biggest of the men. His face flushed with alcohol, leered at her. What we want, sweetheart, is a little attention. I can get you your drinks, Isla said, keeping her tray balanced. I like this one, the man said to his friends. She's got fire. He reached out and grabbed her arm. Not her wrist, her upper arm. His fingers dug in, a grip of casual ownership. Why don't you sit with us? Have a drink. Isla froze. It was the grip, the assumption, the sudden hot spike of fear that traveled from her arm straight to her stomach. It was Caleb's hand, Caleb's entitlement, her training, her hard-won instinct to survive Caleb, told her to placate him, to laugh it off, smile weakly and pull away gently. But she didn't. She was so tired of being grabbed. Her body went rigid. Let go of me, she said. Her voice was low, but it didn't shake. The man's smile widened. He tightened his grip, pulling her slightly off balance. Or what? Or, Isla said, her eyes flashing, you won't be getting any more drinks tonight. Upstairs, in an office that overlooked the entire bar through a wall of tinted, one-way glass, Lucien Varelli watched. He rarely came to the Dagger anymore. He owned it, just as he owned the shipping logistics company by the docks and the high-end import business that everyone knew was just a front. His world was one of silence, spreadsheets and strategy. The bar was just noise, but he'd been watching the monitors tonight. He'd seen Sienna hire the new girl. He'd watched her for hours. He saw the efficiency. He saw the way she moved, navigating the crowd with a dancer's grace born of desperation. He saw the shadows under her eyes, and he saw the man grab her. He watched her freeze. He watched her spine snap straight. He saw her face change. The fear momentarily eclipsed by a raw, defiant anger. She didn't shrink. She didn't cry. She pushed back, with nothing but her voice. Lucien leaned forward. He'd seen 1,000 bar fights, 1,000 drunken passes. This was different. He watched the man tighten his grip, saw the flash of real pain on the girl's face. Lucien stood up. His chair scraped softly on the hardwood floor. Downstairs, the patron was laughing. Tough girl. He started to pull her closer. The noise in the bar didn't stop, but it shifted. A path cleared. Isla felt a change in the air before she saw him, a sudden cold draft. The man holding her arm seemed to notice it too. A shadow fell over their table. "Is there a problem?" The voice was quiet, deep, and carried the chill of a crypt. Isla looked up. The man was tall, dressed in a black suit so perfectly tailored it seemed stitched onto him. No tie, just a crisp white shirt. His hair was dark, his face angular, and his eyes seemed to absorb all the light in the room. He wasn't looking at the drunk. He was looking at Isla. The patron, still holding her, looked up, annoyed. "Mind your own business, pal. Me and the lady are just talking." Lucien Varelli moved his gaze from Isla to the man's hand on her arm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "She told you to let go." It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. The patron's drunken haze began to clear. He recognized the man. Everyone in Belle Pointe, at least everyone who mattered, knew who Lucien Varelli was. The blood drained from the patron's face. He released Isla's arm so fast she stumbled back. "No problem," the man stammered, raising his hands. "No problem, Mr. Varelli, just a misunderstanding." Lucien's gaze lingered on the man for 1, 2, 3 seconds. An eternity of silence. Then he said, "See that it doesn't happen again." He turned, looked at Isla, who was rubbing the red marks on her arm, her heart hammering against her ribs. His expression was impossible to read. It was not kind. It was not cruel. It was assessing. "Finish your shift," he said. And then he turned and walked back toward the private staircase, melting into the shadows he had emerged from. The bar was quiet for a moment, and then the music swelled, the conversations restarting, a collective pretense that nothing had happened. The patron and his friends threw cash on the table and scrambled out of the bar. Isla leaned against the wall, taking a deep, shuddering breath. She worked for another 2 hours, her hands shaking slightly. As the bar was clearing out, Sienna came up beside her at the service station. "You okay, Chicago?" "I'm fine. You made an impression," Sienna said, wiping down the counter. "On those drunks?" "On Lucien." Sienna nodded toward the stairs. "That's the owner. He hasn't come down for a customer in weeks, maybe months. He doesn't do that. He just told him to let go," Isla said, still processing the man's sudden, absolute terror. Sienna stopped wiping and looked Isla dead in the eyes. "Listen to me. New girl. You're running from something. I can see it in your eyes. But whatever you're running from, he's a whole different kind of trouble." "He defended me," Isla whispered. "He's not a white knight, Isla. He's the dragon. He owns this place. He owns this block. And he owns everyone in it. Stay away from him." Sienna leaned in, her voice dropping. "Lucien Varelli is the last man who will ever let you walk away." The warning settled in Isla's stomach like cold cement. At 2:30 in the morning, Sienna paid her the cash tips, $64, more than she'd hoped. "Back tomorrow, 9, Sienna said, locking the register. Isla nodded, pulling her thin jacket tight. "Which way is the back door?" "Through the kitchen to the alley. It's faster." Isla pushed open the heavy metal door. The alley was dark, smelling of damp garbage and ozone. The single yellow light overhead cast deep shadows. She started walking toward the street, her footsteps echoing. "Isla!" The voice came from the doorway. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. He was standing there, a silhouette against the dim light of the kitchen. "Lucien." "You scared me," she breathed. "The alley isn't safe." He stepped out, and the shadows seemed to move with him. "I'm fine." He moved closer, not crowding her, but occupying the space in a way that made the alley feel smaller. The air between them crackled with a silent, heavy tension. "You're walking?" "To the Cypress Inn. It's not far, maybe 10 blocks. "He hurt your arm," he stated. She instinctively covered the red marks. "It's just a bruise." He was quiet for a long moment, his face half hidden in the gloom. He was just studying her. "Are you safe walking home?" The question was so direct, so simple, it almost broke her. Safe. She hadn't been safe in 2 years. She was the least safe person she knew. "I'm fine," she lied, the word tasting like ash. She needed this job. She couldn't be a problem. She couldn't be weak. She turned to walk away. Just as she drew level with him, a motorcycle on the main street, 2 blocks over, backfired, a loud, sharp crack. Isla didn't scream. She didn't gasp. Her body reacted before her mind could. She dropped, her knees hitting the wet pavement, her hands flying up to cover the back of her head in one practiced, reflexive motion. A small, choked sound tore from her throat. The sound of the engine faded, leaving only the drip of a leaky pipe. She was crouched on the ground, shaking violently. Her eyes screwed shut. She heard Lucienne inhale, slowly, mortified. Isla scrambled to her feet, wiping her damp hands on her jeans. "Sorry, I'm jumpy. Loud noises." Lucien hadn't moved. He was staring at her, but his gaze wasn't on her face. It was on her posture. He had seen the terror. He had seen the conditioned response. It was the posture of someone who expected a blow to follow a loud noise. "Good night," she mumbled, and she fled the alley. Her footsteps running, her cheeks burning with humiliation. Back in her motel room, she triple-locked the door and shoved the chair back under the knob. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her body still vibrating. The backfire had opened the door, and now Caleb's voice was in the room with her. "You think you're smart, Isla? You think you can leave me? You are nothing. You're mine." She saw his face. The way his eyes would go flat and cold right before the rage. She remembered him grabbing her phone, scrolling through it, demanding to know who Mike was. "Why are you texting him? You don't talk to anyone but me." She remembered the night he'd slammed his hand against the drywall, right next to her head, the spiderweb of cracks in the plaster. "You don't walk away from me. You don't even breathe without my permission." He had broken her down, piece by piece, isolating her, controlling her money, her friends, her thoughts, the final threat, the one that had finally given her the desperate courage to run, echoed in her mind. "If you ever leave, Isla, I will find you, and I will remind you what you are. I will burn down the world of anyone who tries to help you." She pulled her knees to her chest, rocking silently, praying he'd never find this gray, anonymous town. The next evening, she forced herself to go back. Fear was a luxury she could not afford. She needed the $64. The Dagger was busier, a Friday night crowd. She worked on autopilot, her body aching, her mind shrouded in a dull fog of dread. She avoided Lucienne's staircase, avoided the dark corners. At 11 o'clock, Sienna caught her arm as she flew by. "Boss wants you." Isla's stomach turned to lead. "Me?" "Upstairs, the VIP lounge." Sienna's eyes were complicated. "He needs drinks served." "Said the regular girl is too slow." "Sienna, he asked for you specifically. Chicago." It wasn't a choice. Saying no meant walking out the door, back to the street, back to running. She nodded stiffly. She loaded a tray, a bottle of 20-year-old Pappy Van Winkle and 2 crystal glasses. Her hand was shaking so badly the glasses rattled. She climbed the stairs at the back, her heart pounding a heavy, slow rhythm. The office was nothing like the bar. It was silent. Dark mahogany, leather chairs, and the massive one-way mirror looking down on the crowd. Lucien was standing by the window, watching the floor. He didn't turn. "Mr. Varelli, put it on the desk." She set the tray down, the glass clinking against the wood. "Pour one." She fumbled with the bottle, her hands slick. She poured a measure of the amber liquid. She pushed the glass toward him. He turned, finally. He looked different up here, in his element. He wasn't a shadow. He was the source of it. He wore the silence like armor, and he didn't take the drink. He just watched her. His gaze was unsettlingly intense, not lecherous, like the patron. It was deeper, analytical. He was taking her apart, piece by piece. "You look tired," he said. "It was a long night," she managed. "You're a good liar, Isla, but you're not that good." He finally picked up the glass, swirling the contents. He looked at her over the rim. "The man from last night. He won't be back. Not here. Not anywhere." A shiver went down her spine. "Thank you." He took a sip. his eyes never leaving hers. He saw it all, the exhaustion, the faint tremor in her hand, the hollow quality of her gratitude. He saw the sadness in her eyes, a deep, settled grief that she tried to hide behind a waitress's efficiency. "I have guests arriving," he said. "Stay, serve the drinks up here tonight." It was not a request. Isla looked at the door, then back at him. She was trapped between Sienna's warning and the reality of the man in front of her. She gave a single, jerky nod. "Okay." The next morning, Lucien was in his office when Sienna brought up the previous night's cash report. He signed the ledger, his gaze distant, fixed on the empty floor of the bar below. "That new girl," he said, his voice casual. "Isla." Sienna paused, her hand on the doorknob. She knew that tone. It was the sound of him gathering string. "What about her?" "She's a good waitress." "She's fast." Sienna agreed, offering nothing more. "She's also terrified." He turned from the window to face her. She flinched at a backfire like it was a gunshot. "What's her story?" Sienna's expression remained carefully neutral. She was loyal to Lucien, but she had a soft spot for the broken birds that sometimes landed at the dagger. "I don't ask. Lucien, you know that. She's clean, she's broke, and she's running from something bad. That's all I know. That's all I need to know. She shows up on time and she does the work." "Find out," he said. "It wasn't a request." Sienna sighed. "I can ask, but she's private. Lucien, really private, the kind that walls up if you push too hard." "Don't push," he said, turning back to the window. "Just find out." But there was nothing to find. Isla Shaw didn't exist before she walked into the dagger. She paid for her motel room in cash every 3 days. She had no car, no friends, no social media footprint. She was a ghost. A week passed. The fragile shell Isla had constructed around herself began to harden, reinforced by routine and exhaustion. She learned the rhythms of the dagger. She learned which customers were all talk and which ones had a mean streak. She learned to banter with Sienna, who had relaxed into a kind of gruff, sisterly mentorship. She even learned the names of Lucien's 2 primary bodyguards, stone-faced men named Marco and Leo, who would occasionally appear at the bar, drink club sodas, and watch the room with dead eyes. She was saving money, hiding the small roll of cash under the threadbare mattress in her motel room. It was almost $500, enough to run again, if she had to. The thought was a constant, cold companion, and she felt him watching her. It wasn't the predatory, skin-crawling surveillance she had endured from Caleb. Caleb's watchfulness had been about possession, about ensuring she was adhering to his rules. Lucien's was different. It was a quiet, unsettling curiosity. Sometimes, she would be clearing a table and feel a prickle on the back of her neck. She would glance up at the dark, one-way mirror of his office, knowing he was up there, his gaze fixed on her. He wasn't judging her. He was studying, like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. She grew more confident in the job. She stopped stammering. She learned to meet the eyes of the customers, to smile a small, professional smile that never reached her eyes. She was a good waitress. She was a phantom. Then came Saturday night. The bar was packed, 3 deep, the air thick with the smell of sweat, perfume, and spilled beer. Isla was flying, her tray balanced perfectly. Her mind focused on orders, tables, and the flow of the crowd, a crash of glass, followed by a girl's sharp cry, cut through the din. Isla stopped. In the corner booth, Mia, the newest waitress, barely 20, was staring in terror at a large, red-faced man. A full tray of drinks was shattered on the floor. Mia had clearly spilled it, and the man was soaked. "You stupid little bitch!" the man roared, grabbing Mia's wrist. "Look what you did! This is a $200 shirt!" Mia was crying, trying to pull away. "I'm so sorry, sir. I tripped. I'm so sorry. Sorry ain't gonna cut it." He yanked her arm, pulling her closer. "Maybe you can work it off." Isla's blood ran cold. She saw herself. She saw the man in the booth from her first night. She saw Caleb's face, twisted in rage, before she even realized she was moving. She was there. She placed her own tray on a nearby table and stepped between the man and Mia. "Hey," she said, her voice sharp and clear. cutting through his drunken anger. "It was an accident. Let her go." The man, surprised by her sudden appearance, released Mia, who scrambled back, sobbing. He turned his rage on Isla. He was a big man, built like a longshoreman, with meaty fists. "And who the hell are you? Her mother?" "I'm the one who's going to get you a clean towel in your next round on the house," Isla said, keeping her voice even. Professional. "Now, let's just calm down." "Calm down?" He laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "I don't want a towel. I want her." He jabbed a thick finger toward Mia. "That's not going to happen," Isla said. The man's eyes narrowed. He looked at Isla, at her slender frame, at the defiant tilt of her chin. He saw an easy target. "Mind your own business," he snarled, and he raised his hand, his arm tensing to deliver a backhanded slap. Isla flinched, bracing for the impact, her eyes squeezing shut. It never came. There was a blur of black, a sound that was not a word, but a low, animalistic growl. Lucien. He hadn't come from the stairs. He'd been on the floor, in a dark alcove by the kitchen, watching. Always watching. He moved with a speed that was terrifying, inhuman. He didn't just stop the man's hand. He caught the man's wrist in midair. The sound of bone cracking was sharp and loud, like a stick of dry wood snapping. The man screamed, a high-pitched, agonizing sound. Lucien didn't let go. With his other hand, he grabbed a fistful of the man's hair and slammed his face hard into the solid mahogany bar. The impact was sickening, a wet, heavy thud. The man's nose crumpled. The entire bar went dead silent. The music, the conversations, everything stopped. The man slumped, groaning, blood pouring from his face onto the polished wood. Lucien still held him by the hair, his knuckles white. He leaned in, his voice perfectly calm, a blade of ice in the sudden, absolute silence. He spoke for the man, and for Isla, to hear. "You will not touch my staff." The man was sobbing now, a pathetic, gurgling sound. "You will get up," Lucien whispered, his voice a silken threat. "You will walk out of this bar. You will go to the nearest hospital, and you will never, ever come back. If I see your face, if I hear your name, if you even think about this street again, you will not need a hospital. You will need a priest. Do you understand me?" He emphasized the last 4 words by slamming the man's face into the bar again, just hard enough to make his point. "Yes. Yes. God. Yes." The man wept. Lucien released him. The man collapsed to the floor like a string-cut puppet, clutching his broken wrist and shattered nose. He scrambled to his feet, slipping in his own blood, and fled the bar, a trail of red drops marking his exit. The silence held for a beat. Then Lucien turned. His face was dark, his eyes still holding a cold, controlled fire. He looked at Mia, who was hiding behind Sienna. He looked at the blood on the bar. Then he looked at Isla. She was breathing hard, her pulse thundering in her ears, her hands fisted at her sides. He did a quick, impersonal scan of her body. "Are you hurt?" His voice was flat. She shook her head, unable to speak. The spell was broken. The crowd noise rushed back in, people talking in low, excited whispers. "Sienna," Lucien said, his voice returning to normal. "Clean this up. Get her." He nodded at Mia. "Some water. Send her home." He looked back at Isla. "My office. After closing." It was not a request. He turned and walked away, disappearing up the stairs. Isla watched him go, her heart doing a strange, painful flip. Her knees were weak, but not from fear. Sienna was at her side, handing a trembling Mia over to another waitress. "You okay, Chicago?" Sienna asked, her eyes wide. Isla nodded, still staring at the stairs. She should have been terrified. She had just seen a man's face broken, had heard bones snap. It was brutal, it was violent, but her pulse was racing for a different reason. She wasn't afraid of Lucien. She was thrilled. It was the speed, the absolute terrifying finality of his action. It was the antithesis of Caleb's sniveling. Psychological abuse. Caleb used words, threats, and 1,000 tiny cuts to control. Lucien used absolute, decisive power, and he had used it as a shield for Mia. For her, she had never, not once in her life, felt so protected. The feeling was intoxicating, and that, she realized, was more dangerous than the man himself. At 2:30 in the morning, the bar was finally empty, the last of the chairs stacked. Isla had been wiping down the last table, her movements automatic, her mind replaying the incident. Sienna locked the register and jerked her head toward the stairs. "Go on up. And Chicago?" Isla looked at her. "Be careful," Sienna said, her voice soft. That was not normal, even for him. Isla nodded and climbed the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the quiet building. The office was dark, lit only by the rectangular glow of the one-way mirror, which now reflected the empty, dark bar. Lucien was not at his desk. He was standing by the window, a bottle of expensive whiskey and 2 crystal glasses in front of him. "Sit down," he said, not turning. She didn't sit in the leather client chairs. She perched on the edge of the wooden arm of the sofa, as far from him as she could get. He poured a small amount of whiskey into one glass. He pushed the other glass toward her. She shook her head. "I don't drink." He nodded, as if he already knew. He picked up his own glass, swirling the contents. "You did a stupid thing tonight." Her head snapped up, defensiveness flaring. "What?" "Interfering," he said, turning to face her. He leaned against the window frame. "That wasn't your fight. She's just a kid," Isla said, her voice shaking. "He was hurting her. He was going to... And he was going to hurt you," Lucien finished, his voice flat. "He raised his hand to you. What did you think was going to happen next? You stopped him," she whispered. "I can't be everywhere." He took a small sip of his whiskey. "You're loyal, Isla. Intervening like that. It's brave." He paused. "And it's incredibly stupid. That kind of bravery gets people hurt. It gets them killed. The words, gets them killed, hung in the air. He was talking about more than bar fights. "Being afraid all the time gets you hurt, too," she said, the words out before she could stop them. They sounded small and bitter. His gaze sharpened, zeroing in on her. "You know a lot about being afraid." She flinched, standing up abruptly. "I should go. My shift is over." "He's still after you," Lucien stated. It wasn't a question. "The man you're running from." Isla's breath hitched. She shook her head, lying badly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The way you flinched in the alley that first night," he said, his voice low, methodical. "The way you looked at that drunk tonight, right before he raised his hand. You braced for it. You expected it. That's a learned response." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Please, don't..." He looked away from her, out the window, his expression hardening. "I knew someone once," he said, his voice so quiet she had to strain to hear him. "She trusted the wrong person, someone who was supposed to protect her." He stopped, his jaw tight, his hand gripping the whiskey glass. He broke her, piece by piece. He told her she was worthless, told her no one else would ever want her. He hurt her, and she believed him. He was silent for a long moment. By the time I realized what was happening, by the time I understood, I was too late. I couldn't save her. The confession hung in the air, raw and unexpected, a wound he had just opened. Isla's defensiveness evaporated, replaced by a sudden, aching empathy. This man, this creature of shadows and violence, was marked by the same kind of loss that she was running from. She found herself standing, walking toward him, drawn by the gravity of his pain. She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the muscle twitching in his jaw. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked down at her, his eyes dark and intense. The space between them was electric, charged with his grief and her fear. He was so close. She could smell the faint, oaky scent of the whiskey, the clean, sharp scent of his clothes. He looked at her, and his gaze was so potent, so focused. It felt like a physical touch. He wasn't just seeing her, he was seeing into her. "You don't have to explain your pain, Isla," he said, his voice rough. "I see it." Her breath caught. He wasn't talking about the scar on her forehead or the bruises that had faded. He was talking about the wreckage inside, all the loneliness, the terror, the constant, gnawing fear. It crested, in that moment, into a different, sharper feeling, a desperate, aching need to be seen, to be held. Her hand, trembling, lifted. She didn't know what she was doing. She just needed to connect. Her fingers brushed the back of his hand, where it rested on the windowsill. His skin was warm. He didn't pull away. He didn't move at all. He just watched her, his gaze dropping to her mouth. She leaned in. Slowly, her eyes fluttered shut. This was insane. He was the dragon. He was the danger Sienna had warned her about, but he was also the first person who had looked at her and seen the truth. Her lips were a fraction of an inch from his. She could feel the warmth of his breath. And she panicked. The reality of what she was doing hit her like a physical blow. This was not safety. This was a different, deeper ocean, and she was already drowning. She gasped, pulling back as if she'd been burned. She stumbled a step, her hand flying to her mouth. "I can't." Her voice was a choked whisper. I have to go." She turned and fled the office, running down the stairs, not waiting for him to speak. She burst out of the heavy bar door into the alley, leaning against the cold, damp brick. Her heart was hammering, a wild bird in her chest. She was shaking, not from fear, but from desire. She had wanted to kiss him. She still did. She fumbled in her pocket for her cheap, prepaid phone to check the time. She needed to get back to the motel, back to the flimsy lock and the chair under the knob. The screen lit up, a new message. From an unknown number. Her blood turned to ice. Her fingers felt thick, numb. She opened it. "I know where you are." 4 words, just 4 words. The alley, which had felt like a refuge, was suddenly a trap. The shadows were no longer empty. He was here. Caleb, he had found her. How? How could he have found her? She'd used a fake name. She'd paid in cash. She'd told no one. A wild animal panic seized her. She looked around the alley at the dark recesses and the dumpsters, expecting him to step out. She deleted the message, her thumb jabbing the button again and again, as if that could erase the threat, as if that could make her safe. She spent the next 2 days in a fugue of terror. Every footstep behind her on the street was him. Every man who looked at her for more than a second was him. She went to work. She served drinks. She smiled, but the mask was brittle, cracking at the edges. Every time the heavy front door of the Dagger opened, her head snapped up, her heart seizing. Every time a patron laughed too loudly, she jumped, and Lucien watched her. He watched her from his window. He watched her from the floor. He saw the new, sharper terror. He saw the way her hands trembled when she poured a drink. He saw the dark, sleepless circles under her eyes. It was the 3rd night after the near kiss. Isla was in the kitchen, her hands deep in a sink of hot, soapy water, stocking glasses. She was on edge, her nerves screaming. A busboy, young and clumsy, dropped a heavy, stainless steel tray. It hit the tile floor with a deafening, metallic clang. Isla screamed, a raw, terrified sound. She dropped the glass she was holding. It shattered in the sink, and she dove behind the steel prep counter. She curled into a ball, her hands over her head, her body shaking violently, a small, choked sob tearing from her throat. Dead silence filled the kitchen. The busboy stared, horrified, and Lucien was there. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, his face a cold, hard mask. He sent the busboy away with a single, sharp flick of his head. The boy scrambled out. He walked toward Isla slowly, deliberately, as if approaching a spooked, wounded animal. He crouched down. She was still huddled, trying to make herself small, tears of pure, unadulterated fear streaming down her face. "Isla!" His voice was gentle, impossibly gentle. She looked up, her face pale, her eyes wide and haunted. She saw him, and the dam of her composure broke. "He found you!" Lucien said. It was not a question. She just sobbed, a broken, helpless sound that confirmed everything. He held out a hand, not to touch her, not to pull her, but just an offering. Slowly, she uncurled. She placed her trembling, soapy hand in his. His grip was firm, warm. He pulled her to her feet. She stood before him, dripping, shaking, and completely broken. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering, and the coldness was gone, replaced by a still, dangerous calm. "Do you want me to find out who's after you?" The kitchen was silent save for the drip of the faucet and the ragged sound of Isla's breathing. Lucian's hand was still warm and solid, holding hers. His question hung in the air. "Do you want me to find out who's after you?" Every instinct screamed yes, but the part of her that Caleb had trained, the part that knew survival meant lying, took over. "I'm fine," she whispered, pulling her hand from his grasp. She backed away, wiping her wet hands on her apron. "The busboy just startled me. I'm jumpy. That's all." Lucian didn't believe her. She could see it in the way his eyes hardened, the flicker of impatience in his gaze. He looked at her, this broken, trembling thing lying to his face, and he made a decision. "Go home, Isla," he said, his voice void of the gentleness from a moment before. "You're done for the night. But my shift, you're done." She fled. She didn't bother with the locker room. She just grabbed her jacket and burst out into the alley. The 10-block walk to the Cypress Inn was an eternity of terror. Every shadow was him. Every passing car held his face. She ran the last 2 blocks, fumbled with the key, slammed the door, and shoved the flimsy wooden chair under the knob. She leaned against the door, her heart a trapped bird against her ribs. She was losing her mind. Maybe he wasn't here. Maybe the text had been a bluff, a lucky guess. Her cheap phone buzzed on the nightstand. She stared at it, frozen. It buzzed again, an insistent, venomous sound. She crept toward it, her hand shaking. An unknown number, a new message. She opened it. It was a photograph. Her blood turned to ice water. It was a picture of her, walking, tonight. It was taken from across the street, capturing her back as she hurried away from the bar, her thin jacket pulled tight, her shoulders hunched in fear. A second message came through immediately. "You look scared, baby. You should be. You can't run from what's mine." Isla dropped the phone as if it were on fire. She backed away until she hit the wall, sliding down it. He was here. He was here. In Bell Point, he was watching her. The anonymous gray town wasn't anonymous at all. He had found her. The next 2 days were a descent into a waking nightmare. She didn't sleep. She sat on the cot, staring at the door, listening to the trucks rumble past, every sound a prelude to him kicking in the door. She went to work on autopilot, her body moving through the motions of serving drinks. Her mind detached, floating in a sea of panic. She was clumsy. She dropped a fork, the sound making her leap a foot in the air. She spilled a beer onto a customer's lap, earning a sharp rebuke from the man and a look of frustrated pity from Sienna. And she felt Lucien's gaze. He was in his office, watching her through the glass. It wasn't curious anymore. It was heavy, impatient and cold, late in her shift. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She ducked into the staff bathroom, locking the stall door. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone again. Another photo. This one was of the front of the Dagger, taken from across the street, the heavy black door, the neon sign, the text. "Nice place. They look like hard men in there. Do they know they're protecting damaged goods? Damaged goods?" The phrase broke her. It was his word, the one he used after every fight, every time he made her cry. "You're damaged, Ela. No one else will ever want you. You're lucky you have me." She slid to the tile floor, her back against the stall wall. The sobs came, silent and agonizing, shaking her whole body. She wasn't just afraid, she was toxic. She had brought this plague with her. She was endangering Sienna. She was endangering him. The thought of Caleb trying to face down a man like Lucien made her sick with terror. A sharp knock came on the bathroom door. "Isla?" It was Sienna. "You've been in there for 10 minutes. You okay?" Isla scrubbed at her face, her breath hitching. "I'm fine, just sick." "Well, get it together. Lucien wants to see you. Upstairs, now." She splashed cold, rusty water on her face. The woman in the mirror was a ghost, her eyes wide and haunted, her skin pale. She looked like prey. She climbed the stairs, each step a mountain. He was at his desk this time, not at the window. He was signing ledgers, his face impassive. "You're sloppy tonight," he said, not looking up. "You spilled a drink on table 4. You dropped silverware. You've been in the bathroom for 12 minutes. "I'm sorry, He looked up, his eyes pinning her. "Stop lying!" His voice was sharp, cutting. "You're a liability, you're jumpy, you're dropping things, you're scaring the customers, and you're scaring me." She blinked. I'm scaring you?" "I don't like unstable elements in my business," he said, standing. He walked toward her, not stopping until he was only a few feet away. "I don't like it when my staff look like they're about to shatter. It means something is wrong, and you've been lying to me since the night you got here." He was so close, his presence overwhelming. Who is he? The question, so direct, so final, broke the last of her defenses. The truth poured out, a torrent of shame and terror. "My ex," she whispered, the words tumbling over each other. "His name is Caleb. I ran from him. He controlled every part of my life, my money, my friends, when I slept, who I was allowed to talk to. He told me I was nothing. He told me I was stupid, that I was crazy. He broke things. He hit the wall. He stalked me. I left Chicago with nothing." She was rambling, breathless, expecting him to judge her, to call her weak, to fire her. "And he found me," she finished, the words choked. "He's here. He's been sending me pictures of me walking, pictures of this bar. He's watching me. He says—" Her voice cracked. "He says he still owns me." She stood there, exposed and shaking, waiting for his verdict. Lucien was absolutely still. His face was granite, unreadable. He turned away from her, walking to the massive window, and stared down at the oblivious crowd in his bar. The muscle in his jaw flexed, once, twice. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, cold, and utterly final. "He doesn't own you," Lucien said. "Not anymore." He turned to face her, his eyes dark. "Go finish your shift. I'll drive you home." "I can walk," she said weakly. That wasn't a question. The last 2 hours of her shift were a blur. She felt strangely light, the confession having drained her of all energy. At 2:30, Sienna dismissed her, and Isla met Lucien in the alley. His car was not the flashy machine she might have expected. It was a heavy, black sedan, nondescript and powerful. He opened the passenger door for her, a gesture of old-world courtesy that felt alien. The silence inside the car was suffocating. The engine was a low, expensive hum. The tension that had been building for weeks, the fear, the protection, the near kiss in his office, was a third person in the car, sitting between them. He drove slowly through the sleeping streets of Belle Point. "Where did you meet him?" Lucien asked, his voice quiet. "Chicago, at a small art gallery. He seemed charming. He was an artist. He seemed safe." She let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "I was stupid." "You weren't stupid," he said, his voice flat, a statement of fact, not reassurance. "You were targeted." He pulled up to the curb outside the Cypress Inn. The neon sign, with its broken O, cast a sickly pink light over the car. She reached for the door handle. "Thank you for the ride, and for listening. I'll get my things. I'll be gone by morning." "And go where?" He turned in his seat. The dim light from the dashboard carved shadows under his high cheekbones. "He'll find you again. Isla, you'll run to another town, get another job, and he'll be there. And again, and again." "What else am I supposed to do?" she cried, the frustration and terror of the last 48 hours boiling over. "He'll never stop." "You stop him," Lucien said simply. "How?" she shot back, her voice rising. "By being like you? I don't know how to do what you do. I'm not a killer. I'm not strong." He leaned in, his proximity overwhelming, his gaze intense. "You survived him. You escaped with nothing but the clothes on your back. You walked into my bar and faced down a drunk on your first night. You stepped in front of Mia. You are stronger than you know." His eyes dropped to her mouth. She wasn't breathing. The air in the car was so thick, so charged. It was a physical weight. He moved slowly. agonizingly slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, to flee. She didn't. She met him halfway. The instant their lips touched, the tension snapped. It was not a gentle kiss. It was an explosion. It was desperate. A raw collision of his control and her chaos. His hand came up, not to her cheek, but to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her steady, anchoring her. His lips were firm, possessive, and she answered with all her pent-up fear and loneliness. It was a kiss that said, "I'm alive, and I'm terrified, and don't let me go." It was slow and deep, a drowning kind of kiss that stole the air from her lungs. He tasted of whiskey and absolute control, and for the first time in years, she felt safe. She pulled back first, gasping, her forehead resting against his. Her entire body was vibrating. "Lucienne," she breathed. It was not a plea, it was an admission. He didn't kiss her again, he just held her there, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin behind her ear. She straightened up, shaky, her hand on the door handle. She got out of the car. He got out with her, walking her to the flimsy, peeling paint of room 7. She fumbled with the key. "Thank you," she whispered, not looking at him. For not pressing. For tonight." He stood in the shadows, watching her. Slowly, as if not to startle her, he reached out and cupped her cheek. His hand was warm, his thumb brushing her cheekbone in a gesture of such profound, unexpected tenderness it almost broke her again. "You're not alone now, Isla," he said, his voice low. He held her gaze for 1 second longer, then turned, walked back to his car, and drove away, leaving her in the ringing silence. The next day, Lucien stood in his office with Marco. "I want eyes on her," he said. 24 hours, 2 men, discreet. "I want to know when she breathes, and I want a name for the man watching her." Isla went to work. The bar felt different. The air between the floor and the office was a taut wire. She could feel him watching, but now it felt less like scrutiny and more like a perimeter. Just before the evening rush, Marco reported back, "He's there. Gray sedan, 4 doors. Been parked down the street from the motel since dawn. Watched her get on the bus. Took pictures." Lucien's face was cold. "Good. Find out who he is." He buzzed the bar. "Send Isla up." She entered the office, wary. The kiss hung between them, unspoken. "You can't stay at the motel," he said. "No prelude. It's all I can afford. He was there this morning. He watched you leave. He's still there now." The blood drained from her face. How do you know that?" "I know." He stood, coming around the desk. "You're not safe there. There's an apartment, above the bar. It's empty. You'll stay there." Her defenses flew up, a reflex born of trauma. "No, I can't. I can't be indebted to you. Lucien, I'm not one of your... I don't want..." "One of my what?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "I won't trade my safety for that." She hated the way it sounded, but it had to be said. His expression darkened. "Do you think that's what this is? Do you think I'm him? That I offer protection just to own you?" "I don't know what to think," she cried. "Then think about this," he said, stepping closer. "He knows where you sleep. That motel door is plywood. The lock is a joke. He can get to you in 30 seconds. In my building. He has to get through a steel door, a reinforced staircase. 2 of my men, and then me. You are not safe there." "You will be safe here." The fear won. The simple, cold logic of his words was undeniable. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." He led her from the office, down a private, carpeted hallway to a heavy, unmarked steel door. He used a key, then unlocked 2 deadbolts. The apartment was not the dark, masculine space she expected. It was modern, clean, and filled with soft light from a large window overlooking a quiet side street, a plush gray sofa, a small, clean kitchen with stainless steel appliances, a bookshelf filled with paperbacks. It felt like a home. She walked in, stunned. The refrigerator was stocked. There were fluffy white towels in the bathroom. On the small kitchen counter, there was a vase with a small, bright bunch of daisies. Someone had taken time. Someone had made it welcoming. Who? Who lives here? No one, he said from the doorway. It's a safe place. For emergencies. You did this, she said, touching the petal of a daisy. You bought groceries. Go get your things from the motel, he said, ignoring her statement. Marco will drive you. An hour later, her small duffel bag was on the floor of the bedroom. It looked pathetic in the clean, safe room. That night, she could hear the muffled, rhythmic bass of the bar below. It was strangely comforting, a heartbeat under her feet. There was a knock on the apartment door. She froze. It's me, Isla. She unlocked the door. Lucien was standing there, out of his suit, wearing a simple dark Henley that stretched across his shoulders. He was holding a brown paper grocery bag. You haven't eaten a real meal in days, he said, walking past her into the kitchen. I'm not hungry. You'll eat. He began pulling items from the bag. Fresh pasta, a head of garlic, canned San Marzano tomatoes, a bottle of red wine. She hovered in the kitchen doorway. You cook? I eat, he replied, not looking at her. He found a knife and a cutting board and began mincing garlic with a precise, economical rhythm. The simple, domestic act was so at odds with the man who had broken another's face. She couldn't speak. He gestured to the basil and a clean cutting board. Chop this. She did. The simple task grounded her. They worked in the small kitchen, the silence comfortable. The tension from the kiss, from the fear, began to ease, replaced by the smell of garlic and olive oil. He made a dry joke about Sienna's taste in music. Isla laughed, a real, rusty sound that surprised them both. She was chopping tomatoes when the knife, sharper than she was used to, slipped. Ah, she hissed, dropping the knife, a sharp, deep cut on her index finger. Blood welled up instantly, bright red against her pale skin. Damn it, she muttered, grabbing a paper towel and pressing it against the cut. In an instant, he was at her side. He took her hand, his grip firm but not rough. Let me see. It's fine. It's just... Be still. His voice was low. He led her to the sink, turned on the cold water, and held her finger under the stream. His touch was clinical, yet possessive. His thumb was warm against her palm. He blotted the cut dry with a clean towel. His brow furrowed in concentration. There's a first aid kit in the bathroom cabinet, he murmured, his gaze fixed on her hand. Lucienne, she whispered. Her pulse was hammering, a strange, slow beat. His eyes lifted from her finger to her face. They were intense, dark, and full of something she couldn't name. He retrieved the kit, and with an almost impossible tenderness, he cleaned the cut with an antiseptic wipe and carefully wrapped a bandage around her finger. His movements were sure, economical, and gentle. He didn't release her hand. His thumb began to stroke the inside of her wrist, right over her pulse point. The air in the kitchen grew thick, charged with the unspoken. The smell of garlic faded, replaced by the clean, sharp scent of him. Thank you, she breathed. Be more careful, he murmured. He drew her closer, one hand still holding hers, the other moving to her waist, settling on the curve of her hip. It was a slow-burning, emotionally charged embrace. She rested her uninjured hand on his chest, feeling the solid wall of muscle, the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath her palm. He lowered his head. This kiss was different from the one in the car. That one had been desperate, a drowning. This one was a question. It was slow, reverent, and full of a heat that started low in her belly. She melted into him. Her body, which had been a prisoner of fear for so long, responded to his strength, his warmth. She kissed him back, a slow, deep surrender. His hand moved from her waist to her back, pulling her flush against him, letting her feel the hard length of him. Her fingers tangled in the hair at the nape of his neck. It was heating up, moving from comfort to a raw, undeniable passion. And then he stopped. He pulled back, just enough to look at her. His breathing was heavy, his eyes black with a desire that mirrored her own. But his expression was pained. He rested his forehead against hers. Not like this, he whispered, his voice rough with a control she could feel him fighting for. She looked at him, confused, her body aching, her mind foggy with want. Not while you're afraid, he clarified. his voice quiet but firm. Not when you're trapped here, thinking this is what you have to do to be safe. I'm not him, Isla. This isn't a transaction. He pulled back completely, though his hand lingered on her arm. Eat the dinner I'm making you, he said. Then lock this door. I'll be downstairs. He turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving her shaking by the counter, the smell of tomatoes in the air, and her newly bandaged finger throbbing in time with her heart. The next morning, Isla woke to the muffled sounds of the bar being cleaned below. She had slept for 8 solid hours, a deep, dreamless sleep, the first in what felt like a lifetime. The apartment, with its solid walls and steel-reinforced door, was a fortress. She felt, for the first time, not just safe, but secure. She made coffee and was straightening the kitchen when Sienna used the intercom by the door. Isla, boss wants to see you. Allie, now. Isla's stomach tightened. She hurried downstairs and pushed open the heavy back door. Lucien was standing in the middle of the alley, perfectly still, his back to her. Sienna was beside him, her arms crossed, her face pale. Marco was a few feet away, his phone out. What's wrong? Isla asked. Lucien didn't turn. He just nodded his head to the right. Isla looked. Her breath caught in her throat. There, on the dark brick wall of the building opposite, spray-painted in huge, dripping letters of bright, violent red, was a single word. Damaged. Isla's hand flew to her mouth, a small, choked sound escaping. It was his word, Caleb's word. He had been here, in this alley, feet from where she slept. While she was safe inside, he was marking his territory. He was marking her. She felt the blood drain from her face, the familiar, icy tendrils of panic wrapping around her heart. Lucien turned, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. His eyes were not angry. They were flat, dead, and more terrifying than any rage. He looked at the word, then at Isla's horrified expression. He saw her shame, her terror. Sienna, he said, his voice quiet, devoid of all emotion. Get a crew. Sandblast this. Now. On it, Sienna said, already moving. Marco. Lucien continued, his gaze still on Isla. Get me the security footage from every camera on this block for the last 12 hours. Already pulling it, Marco said. Lucien stepped toward Isla. She flinched, backing up until she hit the doorframe. She looked like a cornered animal. He didn't get in, Lucien said, his voice low, trying to cut through her panic. He didn't touch you. He's just a coward with a spray can. Isla, he's trying to scare you. He was here, she whispered, her voice shaking. He was right here. Lucien, he knows I'm here. Yes, Lucien said, his jaw tightening. He knows. He led her back upstairs, not to the apartment, but to his office. He sat her down on the sofa and poured her a glass of water. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold it. He knelt in front of her, his expression grim, and held the glass to her lips. Drink. She took a small, trembling sip. You're not working the floor anymore, he said. It was a final, non-negotiable command. It's not safe. You'll stay in the apartment, or you'll stay up here with me. I can't hide, she protested weakly. You're not hiding, he said. You're staying smart. He stood and went to his desk. For the next hour, he made phone calls. His voice was low, calm, and lethal. He spoke in a language she barely understood, a clipped shorthand of names, locations, and directives. I need a trace, he said into the phone. An artist out of Chicago. Name's Caleb. I don't know his last name. Find it. He's in my city. I want his location by sundown. I want to know where he sleeps. I want to know what he eats for breakfast. He hung up and made another call. Find me the source of the red spray paint. Every hardware store, every hobby shop, within a 20-mile radius. I want receipts and surveillance. Now. Isla watched him, mesmerized. This was the other side of him. Not the gentleman who had cooked her pasta. Not the protector who had stopped a bar fight. This was the dragon Sienna had warned her about. He was a general moving pieces on a board, a ruthless enforcer using a vast, invisible network to hunt her abuser. And he was doing it all for her. The days blurred into a new, strange routine. She was a prisoner in a velvet cage, safe above the bar, but unable to leave. She grew restless. She couldn't just sit in the apartment, waiting for Caleb to make his next move. She started in the office. First, she just organized the stacks of receipts that Sienna piled on Lucien's desk. Then she began entering them into a ledger. Lucien watched her, surprised by her efficiency. "You're good with numbers," he said one afternoon, watching her reconcile a week's worth of liquor invoices. "I took 2 years of accounting," she said, not looking up. Before I met him." "Why did you stop?" "He told me I was bad at it," she said, her voice small. "He said I was too stupid to handle money, that I should just leave it to him." Lucien's hand clenched on his desk. He was wrong. She began to see the duality of him. She would sit in the office, quietly working on the books, while he took meetings. Men with hard faces and expensive suits would come in, speak in low tones about shipments and territory and problems. Lucien was their leader. He was cold, decisive, and spoke with an authority that left no room for argument. He was a king holding court, and his word was law. But then the men would leave, and he would turn to her. The coldness would recede, and the wounded protector would surface. He would look at her work, a small, almost imperceptible softness in his eyes. "You found a mistake in the distributor's invoice from last month," he said, tapping the ledger. "He's been overcharging me for 6 months. It was just a decimal point," she said. "It's a $10,000 decimal point," he replied, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "You just paid your rent for the next year." She was growing closer to him, drawn into his orbit by the sheer, gravitational pull of his power and his protection. The line between boss and protector, between friend and something more, was blurring into a dangerous, heady gray. One night, the bar was louder than usual. A thick, angry energy seemed to roll up from the floor. Isla, working late in the office, could hear shouts, the kind that were more than just drunken revelry. Lucien looked up from his desk, his head tilted, listening. "Stay here," he said, his voice flat. He pulled on his suit jacket and walked out, his movements fluid and silent. Isla went to the apartment. She locked the steel door, her heart hammering. The sounds from downstairs escalated. She heard the distinct, sickening crack of a pool cue breaking, a roar of male voices, and then the heavy, shattering crash of glass. It sounded like the entire bar was being torn apart. She backed away from the door, her hands over her mouth. She could hear Lucien's voice, not shouting, but a sharp, clear command that cut through the chaos. Then more shouting, and a sound that made her blood run cold, a heavy, wet, thudding sound, over and over. Then silence, a deep, ringing, absolute silence. It stretched for 1 minute, 2, 5. She was pacing, her hands fisted, imagining him bloody, imagining. She couldn't. Finally, a heavy, familiar knock on her steel door. She ran to it, her hands fumbling with the deadbolts. She ripped it open. He was leaning against the doorframe, a dark shadow in the hallway. He was alone. "Lucien?" He stepped into the light of the apartment, her breath hitched. His crisp white shirt was soaked, splattered with bright red blood that was not his. His lip was split, a thin trickle of his own blood running down his chin. His knuckles were raw, split open. He looked exhausted, and a deep purple bruise was already forming on his cheekbone. It's not all yours," he said, his voice rough. "My God," she breathed, pulling him inside. She locked the door and led him to the kitchen, pushing him gently into a chair. He sank into it, his head falling back with a groan. "Stay still," she commanded, her voice shaking but firm. She ran to the bathroom and grabbed the first aid kit he had used on her. Her hands trembled as she soaked a washcloth in warm water. She came back and knelt in front of him. "This is going to sting," she whispered. She touched the cloth to his split lip. He winced, hissing through his teeth, but he didn't pull away. He just watched her, his eyes dark, intense, tracking her every movement. She carefully, gently, wiped the blood, his and others, from his face. Her touch was tender, a stark contrast to the violence he had just come from. She cleaned the cut on his lip, her fingers brushing his cheek. "And you said I was stupid for getting into a fight," she murmured, her voice shaky. A small, pained smile touched his lips. They were new. From out of town. Thought they could make a point. "Did they?" she asked, dabbing antiseptic on his knuckles. "I made one back." She finished cleaning his hands, her own fingers now stained with his blood. She looked down at it, at the stark, red proof of his world, and then up at his face. The tension that had been simmering between them for weeks, the near miss in his office, the desperate kiss in the car, the night he'd cooked for her and pulled away. It all came rushing back, amplified by the smell of iron and his raw, physical presence. He reached up, slowly, and cupped her cheek. His hand was rough, his knuckles still bleeding, but his touch was impossibly gentle. "Isla," he rasped, and she leaned in, closing the distance. The kiss was not a question. It was an answer. It was fire and desperation, a claiming. His other hand came up, tangling in her hair, and he pulled her from her knees, up into his lap, never breaking the kiss. It was messy, desperate, and raw. He tasted of blood and whiskey and power. She kissed him back, a frantic, hungry response, her hands framing his face, her thumbs stroking his bruised cheekbones. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, his breathing heavy. "You're shaking," he whispered. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I heard the glass. I heard the fighting. I thought—" "I'm here," he said. He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, a promise. His hand slid from her hair, down her neck, over her shoulder, settling on her waist, pulling her impossibly closer. He stood, lifting her as if she weighed nothing, and carried her from the kitchen into the bedroom. He didn't turn on the light. The room was cast in the dim, gray glow of the Bell Point night. He set her down gently beside the bed. For a long moment he just looked at her, his eyes unreadable in the dark. He reached out, his split, bloody fingers tracing the faint, half-moon scar on her forehead, the one from Caleb. His touch was a benediction. He leaned in and pressed his lips to it, a soft, reverent kiss that made her knees buckle. "He marked you," he whispered, his voice thick with a cold, terrifying anger. He had no right. He began to undress her, his movements slow, deliberate. He unbuttoned her shirt, his rough knuckles grazing her skin. He pushed it from her shoulders. He unhooked her bra. He knelt and slid her jeans down her legs. He did it all with a worshipper's reverence, his eyes never leaving hers. She stood before him, clad only in her underwear, vulnerable in the dim light. He looked at her slender frame, at the faint, yellowing bruise on her ribs that was the last physical trace of Caleb. He traced the bruise with his fingertip, his touch feather-light. This one, too. He leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her ribs. Isla's breath hitched. A tear slid down her cheek, and then another. He looked up, his face instantly panicked. "Did I hurt you? Isla?" "No," she choked out, a sob mixing with a small, broken laugh. She scrubbed at her face. "No, you didn't. It's just—" She couldn't explain it. It was the tenderness. It was the way he looked at her scars and bruises, not with disgust or pity, but with a kind of gentle, protective rage. He wasn't seeing damaged goods. He was seeing her. "It's release," she finally whispered. I'm not afraid." He stood, his gaze intense. He slowly, deliberately, removed his own ruined shirt, revealing a broad chest, a canvas of old, faded scars. He was a mirror of her, just in a different font. He pulled her to him, his bare, warm skin against hers. His mouth found hers again, and all the tension, all the fear, all the weeks of waiting, finally erupted. He laid her on the bed, and his love was a claiming. It was intense, a slow, deep burn that sought to erase every bad memory, every cruel word, every moment of fear she had ever endured. He worshipped every inch of her, his hands and mouth gentle, possessive, learning her, and she responded with a desperate, hungry passion, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to his strength. It was an act of survival, an act of trust, an act of defiance. It was the safest she had ever felt in her entire life. Later, tangled in the sheets, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her like steel bands, she lay listening to his heartbeat, a slow, steady rhythm beneath her ear. "I haven't felt safe in years," she whispered into the darkness. "Not until I met you." She felt him kiss the top of her head. His voice, when it came, was a low, dark promise, a vow spoken to the shadows. "I will kill anyone who ever tries to take that safety away from you again." She slept, truly slept, wrapped in his arms. The morning light was gray, streaming through the window. She woke slowly, her body aching in a new, pleasant way. She was alone in the bed. She heard the sound of the shower in the bathroom. She smiled, stretching, a feeling of pure, unadulterated peace settling over her. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She picked it up, her smile fading, an unknown number. Her heart stopped. "Not again, please, not again." She opened the message. It wasn't a photo. It was a video. She pressed play. The footage was grainy, taken from a distance. It was the alley behind the dagger. She saw Marco and Leo, standing by the back door, their faces clear. She saw Lucien's black sedan. The video panned, showing the street, the neighboring businesses. The video stopped. A new text came through. "You see, baby, I know all about him now. I know who his men are. I know where he parks. A very, very dangerous man. And you just put a target on his back, on all of them. You're in his world now, and they're all going to get hurt because of you." The phone slipped from her hand, the peace, the safety, the warmth of the night. It all evaporated, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. She had been so stupid. She hadn't just brought this danger on herself. She had brought it into his home. She had made him a target. Caleb knew what he was doing. He wasn't just trying to scare her. He was trying to get her to run again, or worse. He was trying to get Lucien killed. "You're in his world now." She looked around the safe apartment. At the bed, where they had made love, it wasn't a fortress, it was a target. And she was the bullseye. She heard the shower stop. She moved. A frantic, desperate energy seizing her. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing her old, worn-out jeans, her thin shirt. She didn't have time for a shower. She didn't have time to think. She grabbed her duffel bag from the closet. The one she had arrived with, it was all she had. "Isla?" Lucien's voice called from the bathroom. She froze. She grabbed her sneakers. She looked at the steel door. She couldn't let him get hurt. She was a plague, and she had to leave before she infected him, before she destroyed the one person who had ever made her feel safe. She ran to the door, fumbled with the locks, and ran. Down the stairs, past the closed office, down the main staircase. Her footsteps echoing in the empty sleeping bar. She burst out the front door, into the cold, gray morning, and she ran, her duffel bag banging against her side, tears of guilt and terror streaming down her face. She ran all 10 blocks to the bus station. It was empty, save for a sleeping homeless man and a bored ticket agent. "One ticket," she gasped, pulling the last of her cash from her pocket, the $212 she'd hidden from Caleb, the money she'd earned at the dagger, anywhere. The next bus leaving, one way. The agent grunted. "Bus to Cleveland leaves in 10 minutes. "Fine," she said, slapping the money on the counter. She took the ticket, her hands shaking. She was doing the right thing. He was safe. She was leaving. A heavy hand clamped down on her shoulder. She screamed, spinning around, her arm raised to strike. It was Lucien. He was wearing dark jeans, his hair still damp from the shower. He wasn't angry. He was terrifying. He was a storm in a bottle, his eyes blazing with a cold, contained fury. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice lethally soft. "Let go of me, Lucien!" she cried, trying to pull away. "I have to leave. He's targeting you. Because of me. I'm putting you in danger. I have to go." He didn't release her. His grip wasn't brutal, but it was unbreakable. He grabbed her hand, the one holding the ticket. "You don't get to decide who I fight for," he growled. "You don't get to run and make my decisions for me. This isn't Chicago, and I'm not him. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "He'll hurt you. Let him try," Lucien said, his voice a blade. He snatched the ticket from her hand and crushed it in his fist. He pulled her closer, his face inches from hers. "You don't run from people who love you," he said, his voice raw, intense. "You fight with them." The bus station was cold, the gray morning light filtering through the dirty windows. Lucien's words, "You fight with them," echoed in the high-ceilinged room. A stark, simple truth that cut through her panic. He still held her hand, his grip a warm, solid anchor in the sea of her terror. He had seen her video. He understood the threat, but he hadn't flinched. He hadn't told her to run. He had simply come to get her. He led her out of the station, his hand firmly on her back, guiding her to the black sedan. The ride back to the Dagger was silent, but it was a different silence than before. It wasn't the tension of unspoken attraction. It was the heavy, weighted calm before a storm. Back in his office, the steel door locked. He poured 2 coffees, his movements economical and precise. He handed her one. "He's not just an obsessed ex," Lucien said, his voice flat. He looked at the phone she had given him, at the video, at the text messages. "This is organized, the surveillance, the timing. He's being helped." What do you mean?" "I mean," Lucien said, setting his cup down, "that he's a loose end, and I don't like loose ends." He picked up his own phone and made a call. "Find him," he said, his voice low. "Caleb Landry, Rockford. He was staying at the Starlight Motel on the North End. Find out if he's still there. Find out who he's been talking to. I want his head on a plate." He listened for a moment, his expression darkening. "He's still there. Good. Sit on him. I'll be there in 1 hour." He hung up and looked at Esla. "He's at a motel. An hour from here? My men have him boxed in." Lucien moved to a locked cabinet under his desk, retrieving a black leather shoulder holster and a heavy, dark pistol. He began to check the clip, his movements practiced. He was preparing to go. Alone. "No," Isla said, her voice quiet but firm. He paused, sliding the clip back into the gun with a heavy, metallic click. "No? What? You're not going alone." She stood up, her legs shaky but her resolve solid. "You can't. This is my fight. He's my past. I have to be there." Lucien looked at her, his eyes cold. "Absolutely not. This isn't a bar fight, Isla. This is not a discussion. You'll stay here, with Marco, where you're safe." "Safe," she countered, a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat. "I'll never be safe as long as he's out there. Don't you see? If I hide here while you handle it, he still wins. He'll still be the monster in my closet. I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if he's really gone, or if he's coming back." She walked toward him, stopping until she was inches from him. She looked up, meeting his hard gaze. "I'm not that girl anymore. The one who flinches at backfires. The one who runs. You did that. You said it yourself. You fight with the people you love. I am going with you. I have to face him." He stared at her for a long, silent minute. He saw the terror in her eyes, but underneath it, he saw a sliver of forged steel. She was right. This was about closure. This was about her taking her power back. He was offering her protection, but she was demanding her own strength. He gave a single, sharp nod. 5 minutes. Get a heavier jacket." The drive was suffocating. Isla stared out the window, watching the gray industrial landscape of Belle Point dissolve into flat, frozen farmland. The sedan ate up the highway, a silent, black predator. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the hum of the engine. Halfway there, Lucien exited the highway, pulling into a dark, deserted rest stop. Parking in the farthest spot from the lights, he cut the engine. The silence was absolute. "Isla," he said, turning to her. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small, compact black pistol. It was smaller than his, but it looked just as heavy, just as deadly. He placed it in her open palm. Her hand dropped with the unexpected weight. It was cold, cold and solid and terrifying. I can't," she whispered. "You can," he said, his voice calm, instructive. This is my world. You're in it. This is the reality. I don't expect you to use it. I don't want you to use it. But he is unpredictable, and he is a cornered rat. You will not be helpless. His hand covered hers, his fingers positioning her grip. This is the safety. It's on. You don't touch it. He showed her. You point. You pull the trigger. It's that simple. His gaze was intense, locking with hers. You only do this if I am down. If I am on the ground, and he is coming for you. Do you understand? She stared at the terrible object in her hand. This was the price for his protection, for his love. It was a world where you didn't run. You finished the fight. I understand, she said, her voice a dry rasp. Put it in your coat pocket, he instructed, and keep your hand on it. She did. The weight of it against her hip was a sickening, cold comfort. He started the car, and they drove on. The Starlight Motel was a monument to failure, a long, 2-story block of peeling paint and dark windows, set back from a cracked, empty highway. The neon sign was missing its S. It was the kind of place people disappeared from. Lucienne parked 2 buildings down, in the shadow of a derelict gas station. My men are in room 21, across the way. He's in room 17. He cut the engine. Stay behind me. Don't speak unless I tell you to, and keep your hand in your pocket. They got out. The cold night air hit her face, sharp and biting. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under their boots and the distant hum of the highway. They walked up to the door of room 17. The curtains were drawn, a thin, yellow light seeping from the edges. Lucien didn't knock. He stood to the side, raised his foot, and kicked the door just beside the knob. The wood splintered, the lock bursting from the frame. The door flew open, slamming against the inside wall. Lucien was inside in a second, his gun up, scanning the room. Isla was right behind him, her hand gripping the gun in her pocket, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. The room smelled of stale cigarettes, old beer, and a sour, unwashed odor that could only be madness. It was a wreck. Trash was everywhere, and Caleb was sitting in a chair, facing the door, as if he'd been expecting them. He was thinner than she remembered, his skin sallow, his eyes wide and vibrating with a manic, deranged energy. He wasn't scared. He was smug. He smiled, a slow, ugly stretch of his lips. Took you long enough, he said, his voice raspy. I knew you'd bring him. Isla. Knew you couldn't handle things on your own. You always did need a big, strong man to protect you. You just traded up. Lucien was a statue of cold rage, his gun trained on Caleb's chest. Get up, slowly. Caleb laughed, a high-pitched, giggling sound that made Isla's skin crawl. He ignored Lucien, his gaze fixed on Isla. How does it feel, man? He asked Lucien conversationally. Sloppy seconds? Not that I blame you. She's, well, you know. He looked back at Isla, his smile widening. You're damaged goods, baby. I broke you. All the king's horses and all the king's men. He tapped his temple. I'm still in here. I still own you. Shut up, Isla whispered, her voice shaking. He can't save you from me. Caleb cooed, leaning forward. This big, bad mafia man. He thinks he's so tough, but he's the one in my trap. You brought him right to me. Caleb, shut up, Isla said, her voice stronger. She took a step forward, out from behind Lucien. Lucien's arm shot out, blocking her. Stay back. No, she said. She pushed his arm away. She was shaking from head to toe, the gun a heavy, terrible weight in her pocket. But she had to do this. She walked into the middle of the room until she was standing 10 feet from him. You don't own me. Caleb's smugness faltered, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. What did you say? Baby? I am not your baby, she said, her voice gaining strength with every word. I am not damaged, and you do not control me. Not anymore. The smile vanished, his face twisted into the familiar, ugly mask of rage she knew so well. The mask he wore right before he hit the wall, right before he threw the phone. You stupid bitch, he roared, and he lunged. He didn't go for Lucien. He went for her. His hands clawed, his eyes wild. Isla didn't even have time to flinch. There was a blur of motion. Lucien moved with a speed that was not human. He crossed the room in a single, fluid step, intercepting Caleb in midair. He didn't hit him. He grabbed him, spun him, and used his momentum to slam him face first against the drywall. Caleb's head hit the plaster with a sickening, hollow thud. Before Caleb could even groan, Lucien had him on the floor, face down. His arm twisted at an agonizing angle behind his back. Lucien's knee was planted firmly in the center of his spine. He pressed the muzzle of his gun to the base of Caleb's skull. Caleb screamed, a muffled, pathetic sound. His face ground into the filthy shag carpet. "Don't move," Lucien growled. He looked up at Isla, who was standing, frozen, her hand still in her pocket. "He's yours, Isla," Lucien said, though his voice a low, terrifying growl. "He's done. You want him gone. You want me to end this, right now. Say the word." Caleb went still. He was sobbing. Pathetic. Animal sounds. No, please, Isla, baby, please, I'm sorry. Isla stared at the man on the floor, the monster who had haunted her dreams, the god of her terror. He was just a man. A weak, sniveling, pathetic man, choking on dust and his own tears. She pulled the gun from her pocket. Her hand was shaking so hard she could barely aim. She raised it, pointing it at the back of his head. She could do it. One pull, 1 second, and 2 years of pain would be over. He would be gone. She would be free. Lucien watched her, his face grim, waiting for her decision. Isla looked at Caleb's trembling form. She saw all the nights she had cried, all the times he had called her worthless, all the fear, and she lowered the gun. "No," she said. Lucien looked at her, confused. "No," she said again, her voice clear and cold, ringing in the small, filthy room. She stepped forward until she was standing over Caleb, looking down at his terrified, tear-streaked face. "I'm not going to kill you," she said. "I'm not going to make you a martyr. I'm not going to let you die thinking you meant that much." She crouched down, her gaze boring into his. "I hope you live a long time, Caleb. I hope you live long enough to feel as small and as pathetic and as powerless as you made me feel. Every single day." She stood up and turned her back on him. She looked at Lucien, and for the first time, she truly saw him. He was looking at her with a profound, raw admiration, a new respect. He nodded. A single, sharp motion. He pulled his phone from his pocket with his free hand. He made a call. "I have him," he said. "Asset is secure. Send in the cleanup crew." He hung up and looked at Isla. "Let's go. What about—" She motioned to Caleb. "My gift to the city," Lucien said, pulling her toward the door. "An anonymous tip." As they reached the doorway, they heard the sirens. Not one. A dozen red and blue lights flooded the motel parking lot. Police cars, tactical vans. Lucien pulled her into the shadow of the doorway as police officers swarmed the room, guns drawn, shouting, "Get on the ground! Show me your hands!" They hauled Caleb up, his face a mask of confused terror, and slammed him against the wall. "We got an anonymous tip," one officer shouted to another. "Stalking, interstate flight, outstanding warrants out of Chicago, and, well, what's this?" He pulled a large, taped brick of heroin from under the mattress. "Looks like our boy was trafficking, too." Caleb screamed. "That's not mine. I was set up. They set me up." "Tell it to the judge," the cop said, cuffing him. Lucien's hand was on Isla's back, guiding her away, into the shadows. He had planted it, or his men had. He had not just come to kill. He had come to erase. The drive back was as silent as the drive there, but the air was different. It was the vast, empty quiet after the storm. Isla stared out the window, the weight of the gun still in her pocket, a heavy, finished burden. When they reached the apartment, he unlocked the heavy steel door. She walked in. The door clicked shut, the deadbolt sliding home, a sound of final, absolute safety, the adrenaline, the fear, the rage, the profound relief. It all hit her at once. Her legs gave out, and she didn't just fall. She collapsed, sinking to the floor in a heap, The sobs that came were not the silent, terrified tears of her past. They were a primal, gut-wrenching storm. It was 2 years of terror, of pain, of self-hatred, of loneliness, all coming out in one, agonizing, healing flood. Lucien was there in an instant. He didn't try to stop her. He didn't offer words. He just sat on the floor, pulled her into his lap and held her. He wrapped his arms around her like a fortress, his hand stroking her hair, and he let her break. He held her, absorbing her grief, his presence a solid, unmoving promise. He held her for what felt like hours, rocking her gently until the last, shuddering sob tapered off into a weary, hiccuping silence. When she was finally quiet, her face buried in his shirt, he lifted her. He carried her to the bed. This time was not like the first. There was no desperate, frantic passion. There was no need to claim. He already had. He laid her on the mattress and began to undress her, his movements slow, his touch reverent. He kissed the old, faded scar on her forehead. He kissed the bruise on her ribs. He kissed the palms of her hands. It was a slow, healing, almost spiritual act. He made love to her with a tenderness that unraveled the last, knotted threads of her trauma. It was not about passion, it was about trust. It was a silent, powerful vow, a union of two souls who had seen the darkness in each other and were not afraid. It was the slow, deep, reverent worship of a survivor. In the morning, she woke wrapped in his arms, the sun for the first time streaming into the room. She felt light. She felt new. Lucien was awake, staring at the ceiling, but his face was not peaceful. It was grim. "What is it?" she whispered, tracing the line of a scar on his shoulder. He turned to her, his eyes dark. "I got a call," he said, his voice flat. "While you were sleeping, from Marco, about Caleb? About why?" he said, sitting up, the sheet pooling at his waist. "Caleb, he was a gambler, a bad one, owed over $100,000. "To who?" "Not to me," Lucien said, his voice going cold. "To the Rinaldi family." Isla's blood went cold. She knew that name. Sienna had mentioned it. The rival syndicate. "The Rinaldis found out he had a connection to someone inside my bar," Lucien explained, his voice a low, controlled monotone. "They paid off his debt. They funded his trip here. They gave him the surveillance. They painted the word on the wall. They wanted me to find him. They wanted me to go after him." "Why?" she whispered, horrified. "It was a trap," Lucien said, his eyes hard. "A test, to see if you were just staff, or if you were important to me, to see if I would overextend, come out into the open and handle a lowlife like him personally. They were trying to pull me into a fight." Isla felt sick. "So, he was just a pawn. This isn't over." Lucien stood from the bed, his back to her, a magnificent, scarred canvas of strength. He walked to the window, staring down at the city, at his city, bathed in the morning light. "No," he said, his voice a lethal promise. "It's just beginning. Caleb is gone, but they used you to send me a message. They wanted to see if I was vulnerable." He turned to face her, his eyes like chips of ice. "Now," he said, "I'm going to send one back. I'm preparing for war." The morning light in the apartment, once a symbol of safety, now felt like a spotlight, illuminating the target on their backs. Lucien's declaration of war echoed in the quiet room, a cold, hard promise that made Isla's blood run cold. She'd just escaped one monster, only to find herself in the arms of a king who was now being drawn into a battle for his throne. She watched him as he dressed, his movements precise, his face a mask of cold strategy. He was pulling on his armor, the crisp shirt, the tailored suit. He was becoming the man who had confronted the drunk, the man who had broken another's face in the bar. "Don't do this," she whispered, her voice small, fragile. He paused, his hand on his tie. "It's already done. They used you, Ela. They put their hands on what's mine. There is no walking away from that." "But you can," she pleaded, getting out of the bed, pulling the sheet around her. She walked to him, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. "Lucien, please. Let's leave. We can go. Sell this place. Sell all of it. We can go to Spain, or anywhere. We can have a life. A real, quiet life. He turned to face her, and his eyes, for a moment, lost their hardness. He saw the genuine, desperate terror in her face. It wasn't for herself. She wasn't the girl from the bus station anymore. She was terrified for him. "Isla," he said, his voice rough. He cupped her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "You don't understand. This isn't a job. It's an empire. It's my father's and his father's. It runs through my blood. I can't sell it. I can't walk away. If I run, they will hunt us for the rest of our lives. Then don't fight back," she begged, tears welling. "Just let it go. What do they want? Money, territory? Give it to them. What is it worth if you're dead?" He looked at her, and the hesitation that followed was profound. His family's empire ran deep. It was his duty, his legacy. But he had never, not once in his entire life, had someone to lose. He had faced death a dozen times, and it had never scared him. But the thought of leaving her, that was a cold, new terror. He pulled her into a hard, desperate embrace, burying his face in her hair. "I can't promise you a quiet life," he whispered against her skin. "It's too late for that, but I promise you a life. I promise I will end this. I will protect you, but you have to trust me." He pulled back, his eyes intense. "Tonight. It will be tonight." "What will?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They sent their message. Now I'll send mine. The dagger will be closed. I'm moving my men. They want a war. I'll give them one. But you stay here. This apartment is a fortress. The doors are steel. You will not open them for anyone, not even Sienna, only me. Do you understand?" She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. That night was the longest of her life. The bar below was not filled with the familiar, muffled sounds of music and laughter. It was silent, a heavy, waiting, tactical silence. She could hear the occasional low murmur of voices, the metallic click of men checking weapons. Lucien had come up at dusk. He hadn't kissed her. He had simply looked at her, a long, deep look, as if memorizing her face. He checked the small, compact gun he had given her, the one she'd used on Caleb. He placed it on the kitchen counter. "Just in case," he said, his voice flat. "But they won't get this far. Stay away from the windows. Stay away from the door." Then he was gone, and she heard the heavy, final thud of the deadbolts locking her in from the outside. She paced the apartment, a caged animal. She was trapped in the fortress, listening to the silence, her stomach a cold, hard knot of dread. She picked up the gun. It felt heavier than before. She checked the safety, just as he had taught her. She put it in the deep pocket of her robe, her hand gripping the cold metal. Hours passed, 9 o'clock, 10. At 11:17, the world exploded. It started with a crash that shook the entire building, a heavy, grinding sound from the front of the bar, like a truck hitting the wall. It was followed by a split second of silence, and then the night erupted in a barrage of gunfire. It wasn't a pistol shot. It was a war, the sound of automatic weapons, a terrifying, percussive thump, 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 mixed with the sharper crack of Lucien's men returning fire. Isla screamed, diving away from the door, scrambling into the bedroom. She crawled into the deep, dark closet, pulling the hanging coats around her, her body curling into a tight, small ball. The floor beneath her was a drum, vibrating with the violence. Shouts, the shatter of glass, the heavy, sickening thud of bodies hitting the floor. She put her free hand over her mouth to stifle her sobs, her other hand gripping the gun, her knuckles white. She prayed to a God she hadn't spoken to in years. "Please, let him be safe. Please, Lucien, be safe." The firefight seemed to last an eternity. She heard running, heavy boots on the stairs just outside the apartment. They were in the private hallway. Thud, a heavy, muffled impact on her steel door. Thud, thud, thud. They were trying to break it down. They were here for her. She pointed the gun at the closet door, her entire body shaking so violently she could barely hold it straight. The coats rustled around her. Thud, thump, crack. the sound of a heavy sledgehammer. Again and again, they were methodical. They knew she was in here. The steel frame groaned, the deadbolts were holding, but the wood around them was splintering. Crash! The door burst open, torn from its hinges, and slammed against the apartment wall. She heard heavy footsteps. 2 men. They were shouting, their voices adrenaline-fueled and harsh. "Check the bedroom! Rinaldi wants the girl!" The light in the closet was blocked by a large, dark silhouette. Isla stopped breathing. The coats were ripped aside. A man stood there, his face covered in a black mask, his eyes wide and manic. He held a submachine gun, and he was breathing hard. He saw her, huddled on the floor. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. Bingo. He reached for her, dropping his gun to his side, intending to grab her. The boss is going to be very happy. He lunged. Isla didn't think. She didn't feel. The memory of Caleb's lunge, the memory of Lucien's training, the terror and the rage, it all fused into one singular, deafening moment. She raised the gun, her hand shaking, and pulled the trigger. The blast was deafening in the small, enclosed space. The flash lit up the closet, a pop of white light. The smell of sulfur and gunpowder filled her lungs. The man screamed, a high, agonizing sound. He didn't lunge. He collapsed, clutching his leg, a dark, spreading stain blooming on his thigh. "Bitch!" he howled, fumbling for his own weapon. Before he could reach it, the apartment door, or what was left of it, was filled by another shadow. It was Lucien. He was a nightmare. He was covered in blood. A deep cut was bleeding freely over his eye, and his white shirt was soaked in patches of dark, glistening red. His gun was drawn, his face a mask of primal, terrifying rage. He took in the scene in 1/60th of a second. The man on the floor, bleeding. Isla, alive, in the closet, her small gun smoking in her hand. He didn't hesitate. He raised his gun and fired twice into the intruder's chest. Thump, thump. The man was thrown back, silent. The echoes of the gunshots faded, leaving a ringing silence. Isla was still pointing her gun, her entire body locked, her eyes wide, unblinking. "Isla!" She didn't move. "Isla, it's me. You're safe." He kicked the intruder's gun away and walked slowly toward her. He holstered his own weapon and knelt. He gently, so gently, took the small pistol from her frozen, trembling fingers. She looked at him, at the blood running down his face, and the dam of her shock broke. A low, animal wail tore from her throat. He pulled her from the closet into his arms and cradled her against his chest. He sank to the floor, holding her, rocking her, his arms a steel cage of protection. He was covered in blood, but she didn't care. She buried her face in his neck, her sobs raw, agonizing. "It's over," he whispered, his voice rough, his own body trembling with the adrenaline. "It's over. You're safe. You're safe." He held her there, in the doorway of her violated sanctuary, until her sobs began to quiet. He pulled back, his bloody hands framing her face, his gaze searching hers. "You're mine," he whispered, his voice raw, possessive. "You are mine, and I will burn the world for you." In the weeks that followed, a new kind of quiet settled over the dagger. The war was over. Lucien had moved with a speed and a brutality that had stunned the Rinaldi family. He hadn't just fought back. He had systematically dismantled their operations in Belle Point, using the attack on his home as justification. The city knew. Lucien Varelli's territory was his. But his home was sacred. But the violence had changed him. Or perhaps it had changed what he wanted. He had come within an inch of losing her. He had seen her, covered in another man's blood, and had realized that his empire meant nothing if she wasn't safe in it. He began to step back. He entrusted the day-to-day, the frontline business, to Marco and his other lieutenants. He was still the king, but he no longer sat on the throne every night. He started channeling his energy and his family's vast resources into cleaner ventures. His first project was the dagger. He didn't just repair the damage, he began a massive expansion. He bought the neighboring warehouse, the one where Caleb had painted his threat on the wall. He was turning it into a high-end restaurant, a legitimate, beautiful space. And as Lucien built his new world, Ela began to rebuild her own. With the threat of Caleb gone, with the war in the shadows over, the constant gnawing fear that had defined her life finally receded. She had room to breathe. She had room to live. She enrolled in a local community college in the interior design program. She spent her days with blueprints and color swatches. Her nights helping Lucien plan the new restaurant. She was reclaiming the life that had been stolen from her. And she started painting again. The apartment, once a fortress, became a home. It was filled with her canvases. With the scent of turpentine and oil paint, one evening, months later, Lucien came upstairs. The sounds of construction were quiet. He was weary from a long day of meetings. His tie loosened. Isla was standing in the middle of the living room, in front of an easel. She was nervous. I made you something," she said. He walked over, standing beside her. It was a painting. He recognized it instantly. It was the alley behind the dagger, with its brick walls and its single yellow light. But in her painting, it was different. She had painted it not as it was, but as it felt. The bricks were warm, shades of terracotta and rose. The single light was not a sickly yellow, but a bright, brilliant star. And in the spot on the opposite wall, where the word damaged had been spray painted, she had painted a cascade of bright white flowers, spilling from a window box. She'd taken the darkest, ugliest place in her memory, and she had filled it with light. He was silent for a long time, just staring at it. He couldn't speak. She misunderstood his silence. Is it okay? I wanted to... He pulled her to him, his arms wrapping around her from behind. He held her tight, his chin resting on her shoulder as they both stared at the canvas. "You didn't just survive," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard from him before. "You made me want to live." She turned in his arms, her own eyes bright. He kissed her. It was not the desperate, claiming kiss of their past. It was soft, deep, and full of promises. It was a kiss of peace. Later that night, long after the restaurant plans were put away, Lucien walked through the main floor of the bar. It was empty. He checked the registers, and then, for the last time, he walked to the heavy front doors. He turned the key in the lock. Click. He threw the heavy deadbolt. Thud. He turned, and Isla was waiting for him at the foot of the stairs, a small, soft smile on her face. He walked to her, took her hand, and turned off the last of the lights, plunging the bar into a familiar, comfortable darkness. He led her up the stairs, not to the fortress, but to their home. He closed the door, and the sound of the lock sliding into place was not a sound of fear. It was a sound of finality. It was the sound of a world, finally, at peace. Thank you for listening to this story. We hope you enjoyed the journey with Isla and Lucien. Please, take a moment to comment below and let us know where you are listening from. We love hearing from our audience all over the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more tales of love and danger. And please, share your thoughts on the story in English. We read every one.